My name is Marianne Cole. I'm 62, a retired school librarian from Winter Springs, Florida. For most of my life, I believed family was something you built and protected, even if it chipped away at you. I never imagined mine would send me a text that would make me feel like a stranger on the edge of my own story. That morning, the sun over Port Canaveral was ruthless, bright, sharp, reflecting off the silver of cruise ship rails. I stood in line with my suitcase, boarding pass in hand, sunscreen still tacky on my arms. Around me, families were laughing, calling to one another, children running in circles while porters loaded luggage. I'd spent weeks planning this trip with my son Adam, his wife Brianna, and my 2 grandkids. It was supposed to be my first real vacation in over a decade, a way to finally belong again instead of watching their lives through photos and phone calls. When my phone buzzed, I thought it was Adam telling me where to meet them, but the words froze me where I stood. "Mom, there's been a change of plans. You're not family. You can't come on our cruise." For a few seconds, I honestly thought it was a mistake, a wrong text, a joke that would untangle itself if I called back. I dialed anyway. No answer. Above the terminal glass, the massive ship loomed like a white city floating on water. And then I saw them, Adam, Brianna, little Eli and Harper, already on the upper deck, their silhouettes bright against the sky. The kids waved at someone in the crowd. Not at me. My throat tightened. I tried to swallow the disbelief, the heat, the humiliation. People around me kept moving, handing over passports, posing for selfies. I stepped out of the line, dragging my suitcase behind me. It felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because that was the moment I realized something had snapped. Not just a plan, but the illusion that love was automatic, that motherhood guaranteed a seat at the table forever. I called for a car and turned away from the ship. The driver asked if I was all right. I said yes, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. As we pulled out of the port, the ship's horn roared behind me, long, loud, final, and that was the sound of my breaking point. When I got home, the quiet felt wrong, too still, too hollow. Like the house itself was waiting for me to realize something I'd missed all along. I left my suitcase by the door and stood there, frozen, the faint scent of sunscreen still clinging to my skin. On the coffee table sat a framed picture of us from Christmas 5 years ago, Adam with his arm around me, Brianna smiling, the kids in matching pajamas. We looked happy then, but staring at it now, I could see it. The small distance in Adam's eyes, the way Brianna leaned slightly away. I sank onto the couch and let the silence stretch. My chest felt tight, not just from what happened at the port, but from years of pretending not to notice how I'd been slowly pushed to the edges of their lives. "You're not family." The words replayed in my head like a bell I couldn't unhear. After a while, I stood up and walked into my little office. The room smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. It was where I kept every document that mattered: birth certificates, insurance, tax records, and one folder I hadn't touched in a while, a blue one, labeled property. I pulled it from the drawer and sat down. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. There it was, the deed for the house Adam and Brianna lived in. My name, Marianne Cole, printed neatly across the top. I bought that house 6 years ago, right after their wedding, using what was left of my savings and a teacher's pension. They couldn't afford it back then, and I wanted to help. Adam had promised he'd take care of the paperwork later. Later never came. I stared at that piece of paper until the words blurred. It wasn't just a deed. It was a record of everything I'd given without ever asking for anything back. Love had made me generous, too generous. I picked up my phone and called Stephen Marks, my attorney, an old friend from the library board. My voice was steady, almost detached when I spoke. "Stephen, it's Marianne. I need to ask about my legal rights regarding a property I own. It's still under my name." He hesitated for a moment before answering. "You're the sole owner, Marianne. You can sell it, rent it, transfer it, whatever you want. There's no binding agreement unless something was signed." I felt my stomach tighten. "So, legally, I can sell it without their consent?" "Yes," he said gently. "If it's still in your name, it's yours." When I hung up, I sat there in silence for a long time. The air felt different, thicker somehow. It wasn't anger I felt, not exactly. It was clarity, sharp and cold, cutting through years of guilt and excuses. I realized I'd been begging to belong to a family that only wanted pieces of me, the money, the time, the help, but not me. I walked through the house, turning off lights one by one, as if I were closing chapters. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection, tired eyes, salt gray hair pulled back, but a steadiness I hadn't seen before. Maybe this was what strength looked like when it finally stopped apologizing for itself. Before bed, I opened my journal. My handwriting wobbled slightly as I wrote. They left me at the dock. But maybe they also left me a door, out of this life where I'm always the extra. I closed the book and exhaled. Tomorrow. I would call Stephen again and ask him to recommend a realtor, not because I wanted revenge, because I was finally ready to stop waiting for an invitation back into a family that had already sailed away. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds and found me still sitting at the kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold, but I hadn't moved in an hour. I'd made up my mind during the night. I was done waiting for an apology that would never come. By 9. I called Stephen again. He sounded surprised that I was up so early. "Marianne," he said. "You sure about this?" "Yes," I answered. "I'm selling the house. I want it done fast but legal. No surprises." He promised to handle the paperwork and connect me with a trusted realtor. By noon, I got a call from Tara Nguyen, a woman with a calm, steady voice and the kind of confidence that puts you at ease. We agreed to meet the next morning at the house. Their house. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every memory built inside those walls, the birthday dinners, the grandkids' laughter echoing down the hallway, Brianna's polite smiles that never reached her eyes. I remembered the first time I handed Adam the keys, how he'd hugged me so tightly and said, "Mom, this house will always be your home too." I almost laughed thinking about it now. The next day, I drove across town to League City. The front yard looked perfect. Brianna's gardenias bloomed in neat little rows. The porch swing I bought still hanging. It felt strange unlocking the door, like stepping into a place that had my fingerprints everywhere but no trace of me left. Tara met me there, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp and kind. She walked through each room quietly, taking notes. "This is a beautiful property. Marianne, if you're open to it, I have a couple who've been looking for something just like this. They can close in a week, cash offer." I nodded, my throat tight. "That's fine. A week is perfect." By Friday, everything was moving. Stephen handled the legal forms, Tara arranged inspections, and I called a moving company. I gave them strict instructions. Pack only what belongs to Adam's family, everything else stays. I had the boxes labeled and stored in a temperature-controlled facility across town, prepaid for 3 months. That evening, I sat at their kitchen table, my table, technically, and wrote the letter. I didn't draft or rewrite it. I just let the words come, steady and clear. Adam and Brianna, the house you called home has been sold. It was always mine, legally and otherwise. I finished paying the mortgage 2 months ago with what was left of my retirement savings. When you told me I wasn't family enough to join your cruise, I realized you'd already drawn the line long before that message. This is me drawing mine. Your belongings are safe in storage, paid in full until you make other arrangements. Stephen has the address and the key. You can reach him for details. Not me. Don't look for me. I need time to find the parts of myself that got lost while I was busy being everyone else's mother and grandmother. I wish you well. Mom. When I signed my name, my hand didn't shake. The letter wasn't written in anger. It was written in peace, the kind that comes only when you stop begging to be chosen. I left the letter on the kitchen counter beside a single house key, turned off the lights, and stood in the doorway one last time. For a moment, I imagined them walking in, reading the note, realizing what they'd lost. Then I closed the door and locked it from the outside. For the first time in years, I felt like the one holding the key. 3 days later, I was watering the potted fern on my balcony when my phone started ringing nonstop. At first, I ignored it. Then I saw the name, Adam. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. Finally, a sharp knock rattled my door. Through the peephole, I saw him standing there, his face pale, shoulders tense. When I opened the door, he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Mom," he said, voice shaking between anger and disbelief. "How could you do this? You sold our house?" I took a slow breath. It wasn't your house, Adam. It was mine, legally, and in every other sense. You just lived in it. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the living room like a caged man. We had a life there. The kids' rooms, their memories, everything. I thought about them, I said quietly. I made sure all your things are safe in storage. You have 3 months paid ahead. That's not the point, he snapped. You blindsided us. We came back from vacation, and the locks were changed. What kind of person does that to her own family? The word family landed like a stone. For a moment, all I could do was look at him, the son I'd raised alone, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose future I'd built piece by piece. What kind of person? I repeated softly. Maybe the kind of mother who finally realized she's been treated like a convenience. You told me I wasn't family, Adam. I just believed you. He stopped pacing. That text, it was Brianna's wording, not mine. She thought it would be better to keep things simple, just the 4 of us. And you agreed. He didn't answer. His silence said enough. I gestured toward the couch. Sit down, Adam. My voice came out calmer than I expected. I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it because I've spent years disappearing for your comfort, paying bills you couldn't, watching your kids when you needed help, and being quietly dismissed when I asked for time together. He sat, staring at the floor. We never meant to hurt you. But you did. The air between us thickened. He looked up, eyes glossy but proud. Where are we supposed to go now? What are we supposed to tell the kids? I sighed. You tell them the truth. That grandma needed to start her own life. That sometimes adults make hard choices when they've been hurt too many times. He let out a shaky laugh, half frustration, half disbelief. You think this is healthy? Selling your son's house? No, I said. I think lying down and letting people walk over me wasn't healthy. This is just balance. He stood, his voice rising. I don't even recognize you anymore. Maybe that's because you never really looked. The words hung in the air like something fragile and final. Adam pressed his lips together, then took a step toward the door. Brianna's devastated, he said quietly. The kids keep asking for you. I miss them, I whispered. But I need time, Adam, and space. The same thing you told me you needed. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he opened the door and left. When the door clicked shut, the apartment fell silent again. My knees gave out, and I sank onto the couch. The tears came quietly this time, not from guilt, but from release. Outside, the evening sun glowed on the rooftops, warm and indifferent. I realized then that freedom doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes, it feels like loss before it starts to feel like air. A week after Adam stormed out of my apartment, I booked a one-way ticket to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I didn't tell anyone, not even Steven. I just packed a single suitcase with a few dresses, my journal, and the old camera I hadn't touched in years. I didn't know exactly what I was running toward, only what I was leaving behind. Santa Fe greeted me with thin air and a kind of silence that felt clean. The mountains wrapped around the city like patient giants, and the air smelled faintly of sage and clay. I rented a small studio apartment above a pottery shop called Desert Light Ceramics. The owner, a soft-spoken woman named Lucinda, offered classes in the mornings. "It's not about making something perfect," she said. "It's about listening to the clay. It tells you where it wants to go." The first time I sat at the wheel, I made nothing but mistakes. The clay wobbled, collapsed, spun out of shape. My hands were clumsy. My mind scattered. But there was something healing about the mess, the way the clay didn't care who I was or what had happened. Every spin, every collapse felt like an invitation to start over. Days turned into weeks. My mornings were filled with clay dust and the hum of the wheel. In the afternoons, I volunteered at a local community kitchen. I peeled potatoes, chopped onions, and served hot soup to strangers who always looked me in the eye when they said thank you. In that simple exchange, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. One evening after class, Lucinda handed me a small cup I'd made on my first day. It was uneven and crooked, but she smiled. "You kept showing up," she said. "That's the hardest part." I took it home and placed it on the windowsill, next to a small cactus. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine, like this new version of myself, imperfect and alive. 2 weeks later, I opened my email and froze. The sender's name, Brianna Brooks. "Dear Marianne, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to say this. What happened wasn't fair to you. We hurt you, and I can't make excuses for it. Adam and I started therapy. We're learning things about ourselves we didn't want to see. You didn't deserve to be excluded like that. The kids miss you. I miss you too. I hope one day we can start again. Differently." I read it 3 times. There was no manipulation in her tone this time. No sugarcoating. Just honesty. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. The desert sky was streaked with orange and violet, a color that seemed to hum with forgiveness. The next day, Lucinda found me in the studio shaping a small bowl. "You look lighter," she said. "I got an email," I told her. "An apology." She smiled. Sometimes people need to lose their balance before they learn to stand right. That evening, as I walked home through the adobe-lined streets, I felt something shift inside me. Not a full forgiveness yet, but a loosening, a quiet release. A few days later, another email came. This time, from Adam. "Mom, I'm flying to Santa Fe next week alone. Now, I'd like to talk if you'll let me." I sat at my tiny table, staring at the words. My heart pounded, not from anger or fear, but from the weight of possibility. When he arrived, he looked older, worn, We met at a small cafe near the plaza. He brought flowers, not fancy ones, just daisies. I could tell he hadn't slept much. "Your paintings on Facebook," he said, gesturing awkwardly. "They're beautiful." "They're not paintings," I said, smiling faintly. "They're pots." "Clay?" He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I never thought you'd actually sell the house. I thought you'd forgive us like always." "I forgave too quickly for too long," I said. "Sometimes forgiveness has to come after truth." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. We took you for granted. I don't want to lose you." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You already did, Adam, but you found me again in a different way." The sky outside the cafe turned gold, and for the first time, I believed we might actually rebuild, not from guilt, but from something honest. I stayed in Santa Fe for 2 more months. By then, the desert wind had softened something inside me. My mornings were quiet. Coffee, the hum of the pottery wheel, sunlight warming my hands. I started selling small bowls at the weekend market, each one slightly uneven, each one carrying a piece of my story. When strangers picked them up and smiled, I felt proud, not for perfection, but for persistence. One chilly afternoon in early March, I knew it was time to go home, not to the old house, but to a new version of my life. I called Adam and told him. He sounded nervous, like a boy again. "Do you have a place to stay, Mom?" "Yes," I said. "I've already rented an apartment downtown, near the park. It's small, but it has great light." He paused, then said quietly, "I'm glad you're coming back." The flight home felt different this time. No dread, no heavy heart, just curiosity about what waited ahead. Florida looked greener than I remembered, humid and alive. My apartment was cozy, filled with sunlight and the faint smell of paint from the new walls. I hung one of my clay pieces on the shelf, the crooked cup Lucinda had given me. It was my reminder. Broken doesn't mean ruined. The first Sunday after I returned, Adam and Brianna invited me over for dinner. For a second, I hesitated, the old fear stirring. But when I walked in, something had changed. The house they rented was smaller, simpler. The air felt lighter, almost humble. Brianna greeted me at the door, apron still on, cheeks flushed from cooking. "Hi, Marianne," she said softly. "I made roast chicken. The kids helped with dessert." I smiled. That's brave. Adam laughed, and the sound was real this time. The kids ran to me, arms tight around my waist. "Grandma, you came." Dinner was easy. We talked about small things, the weather, Eli's school project, Harper's new fascination with dinosaurs. No apologies, no rehashing the past, just space, calm and new. After dinner, Adam walked me to my car. The night was warm, the air thick with the smell of gardenias. He leaned against the hood, eyes gentle. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe what happened was the best thing that could have happened. It woke us up." I looked at him, my son, older, softer, finally aware. Sometimes, losing the home we built makes us find the family we forgot to be, I said. He nodded slowly. "I never thanked you for everything, not just for the house, for being strong enough to stop us. If you hadn't, we'd still be blind." I smiled, a quiet kind of smile that didn't need words. When I got home, I lit a candle and sat by the window. The night outside was quiet, except for the distant hum of cars and the sound of a train rolling somewhere far off. I opened my journal and wrote, "Freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it sounds like peace." A week later, on my 63rd birthday, Adam and Brianna surprised me with a gift, a ticket to a 2-week pottery retreat in Oregon, Inside the card, Adam had written, "Keep making your own shapes. Mom, you've taught us how—" I traced the words with my finger, tears catching at the corners of my eyes. It wasn't the grand apology I once hoped for. It was better. It was understanding. I looked around my little apartment, at the sunlit walls and the smell of clay and coffee. I wasn't anyone's extra anymore. I was my own beginning. And for the first time in a long, long while, that was enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.